Good morning, bonjour everyone. Welcome. My name is Marcel Préville, and my day job is Strategic Advisor for the Department of Western Economic Diversification with the Government of Canada. And my other day job is as the Vice Chair of IPAC Edmonton Regional Group Board. So I'm here in that capacity this morning. For those of you who don't know, IPAC stands for the Institute of Public Administration of Canada. And it's an organization that's a dynamic organization serving public servants from all orders of government, as well as academics and others interested in public administration and public policy. And I see there's maybe some of those students and others in the room today. IPAC's mission is to promote excellence in public service by encouraging the highest standards of professional practice and service to the public, expanding and exchanging knowledge and contributing to the resolution of key issues in public administration, and promoting the education and professional development of public administrators through national and regional conference and events such as this one this morning, and to offer an opportunity for colleagues of all orders of government to discuss issues of common concern that each of us face. The Edmonton Regional Group is one of 18 regional groups across the country, and with 700 members, we are one of the biggest organizations in Canada. We have members from the provincial and federal governments, as well as from the cities of Edmonton, St. Albert, Sherwood Park, from Strathcona County, Leduc County, and the University of Alberta, just to mention a few. For more information on IPAC, how to join and learn about upcoming events, please visit the IPAC website at ipac.ca/Edmonton. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors who have contributed to making today's event a possibility. First off, I want to thank the Alberta Corporate Human Resources, Alberta Education, KPMG, Myers Norris Penny, and the Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research here at the University of Alberta. Thank you very much to all of those, and let's give them a round of applause. Now, speaking of today's events, as you can see in front of us, we have an exceptional set of thought leaders who are joining us today. Today, we will discuss what makes a good public sector leader. And with the world and the public sector getting even more complex, what competencies they will require as we start to look 10, 20, and even further years down the road. How well does our education system do in preparing these leaders? And what are some opportunities that we can build, that we can use to build a roadmap around preparing them for public sector leaders' positions of tomorrow? When you arrived, you should have received a package that outlines the agenda for the day, as well as provide some additional background information that lays the groundwork for our conversations today. I know everyone is busy managing work commitments. However, we'd like to ask that you please turn your mobile devices to silent. And if you'd like to take a call, please do so in the lobby. To get started today, our thought leaders will dive right into the topic and share their own perspectives. So allow me to make a few introductions. I'd first like to introduce Christine Couture. We'll have you wave as we introduce you. There you go. Christine is the Senior Assistant Deputy Minister for Leadership and Talent Development with the Government of Alberta. Christine joined the public service in 1991 and has served in senior leadership roles in several departments, notably as the Deputy Secretary to Cabinet and Deputy Clerk of Executive Council, where she was responsible for supporting Cabinet and its committees and the day-to-day operations of Executive Council, including Cabinet coordination, government operations, machinery of government, protocol office, and corporate services. Previous to this, she held senior leadership roles as ADM of Strategic Policy with Alberta Health and ADM of Policy and Executive Council with various executive director positions. Today we also have Dr. Lorne Parker. Dr. Parker is Executive Director of Infrastructure for the Edmonton Public School Board. He has served as a key advisor to the Superintendent and Board of Trustees and provides strategic leadership to 4 direct reports and approximately 450 indirect reports. He is currently leading several strategic initiatives, including the Edmonton Public School Board's infrastructure plan, the EPSB real estate strategy, whose scope includes the management of over 200 leases, and co-leading the Edmonton Student Transportation Authority. Next, we have Dr. Marvin Washington, an Associate Professor of Sport Management at the University of Alberta. He has taught sport management, organizational behavior, principles of management, organizational change and theory to undergrads, master's, and doctorate level students. Prior to joining the University of Alberta, he was Assistant Professor of Management at Texas Tech University. In 2004, he was awarded the Texas Tech University President's Excellence in Teaching Award. And finally, but certainly not last and least, we have Dr. Heather Zwicker, who is Professor of English and interim, excuse me, Vice Provost and Dean of the Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research at the University of Alberta. A cultural studies researcher, she brings post-colonial and feminist theories to bear on problems such as stereotypes, universities, classrooms, and cities. She has an enduring interest in public leadership and serves on the advisory board of the Peter Lougheed Leadership College. Dr. Zwicker is the winner of several teaching awards, including the 3M National Teaching Fellowship. Today we have a couple other folks who will be joining us. Our lead facilitator for the day is Lynn Cook, who's sitting over there, big hand, there she is. Lynn, who after obtaining her MBA, joined the University of Alberta Hospital and held several positions, including 6 years as a vice president. She served as the Chief Operating Officer for the UAH, University of Alberta Hospital, in addition to being the Executive Lead for Human Resources for Capital Health when it was formed. Relocating to Yellowknife, she spent time as the Public Service Commissioner. Lynn returned to Edmonton in 2005 as the Executive Director of HR for several ministries and is currently Executive Director for Human Resources with Alberta Human Services. And the last person I'd like to introduce is our moderator for the fireside chat, is Anissa Elabas. Anissa? Anissa works as manager at the Canada Revenue Agency and is the chair of the YPN, so that's Edmonton Young Professionals Network, Committee for Young Professionals, whose role is to support the development of young and new professionals. Most recently, Anissa served in the capacity of a group leader in the Forum for Young Canadians in Ottawa, an event devoted to networking and diversity sharing between 120 youth of our country. Anissa is the mother of 3 beautiful children, active daughters, and she participates as a volunteer for several groups in her community. So, with all of that, it's my pleasure to turn the floor over to Lynn and Anissa and our thought leaders. So let's please give everyone a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So I would just like to remind that our thought leaders are going to take turns in speaking. We would like to ask if you could please hold back your questions until the end of their speaking notes, where you will be given time to ask the questions that you would like to ask. So first, I would like to introduce Christine Couture, please.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone has had a good morning so far. It looks like it's going to be spring out there, so glad to be here today as the Senior Assistant Deputy Minister of Leadership and Talent Development with Corporate Human Resources for the Government of Alberta. I'm very pleased to be talking to you today about leadership, and specifically on building and developing leaders of tomorrow. Leadership has been an important part of what it means to be a public servant for me, and for as long as there has been an Alberta public service. Back in the beginning, about 110 years ago or so, Alberta's public service consisted of 60 people serving approximately 160,000 Albertans. Today, our population is 4 million, and our public service employs around 27,000 employees. Our public service has evolved right alongside the increase in our population. Over 27,000 employees throughout the province and 20 different departments in the Alberta government. There are a wide variety of interesting careers for people to choose from, including finance, corrections, human resources, health, culture, trades, agriculture, information and technology, and I could go on. All organizations, not just the Alberta government, need to attract top talent utilizing a multidimensional approach involving leadership from the public service, elected officials, and educational institutions. Alignment between the competencies of leadership and academic needs to continue as competencies evolve. Across all organizations, there is a need for leadership at all levels, from entry level to the most senior positions. And with this comes the imperative for us to be collaborative and innovative in developing the leaders of tomorrow. The public service today is confronted with issues that are not unique to the public sector. Demographics, changing expectations of the workforce, the changing expectations of the public, and fiscal restraint. These are issues that we all face. All sectors have a need for leaders that will not only confront these issues, but thrive and shape this environment now and into the future. We will always have our challenges, but very few employers can offer the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of Albertans. Working collaboratively to develop future leaders aligns with the vision of the Alberta Public Service, which is proudly working together to build a stronger province for current and future generations. For me, leadership starts first and foremost with values. And what better values to look at than the 4 values of the Alberta Public Service? Respect, accountability, integrity, and excellence. First, I'd like to talk about respect. We all deserve to be treated with respect, regardless of the circumstances of any given situation. And we have an obligation, in my opinion, to treat everyone else with respect. It's really one of the most basic principles that we all learned in kindergarten. Treat others the way you'd like to be treated, and the world will be great. We sometimes forget this is our quest to get work done, often under tight timelines and sometimes in difficult circumstances. The second value is accountability. In terms of accountability, I'm very results-oriented and hold myself and others accountable for achieving results, ideally on time, on budget, and on specification. But having learned over the years, and I would argue now, that how you achieve results is as important as the results you achieve. In order to achieve results, we need clarity on what the outcome is and why it's important. This is where building and maintaining strong relationships comes in. We work in a very complex system, and there is really little that we can achieve alone. Building and maintaining strong relationships with employees, with your peers, with your stakeholders and partners, and your boss, of course, is critical. I would say this is one of the most important characteristics of a good leader. My entire career has been built on my ability to understand and work well with others. I'm only able to achieve great results by sometimes being able to stand on the shoulders of others, knowing who to call when I need help or when I need a compassionate ear. I return the favor by sharing what I know, responding quickly, and being available when my colleagues call. The third value is integrity. Integrity is also foundational. We need to be able to operate based on trust and honesty. Trust is built by helping others resolve difficult problems and following through on your commitments. Do what you say you're going to do. Anything less is non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned. Your credibility and your follow-through on commitments, how you show up and how attentive you are, demonstrate loyalty to others and to the organization. Credibility and integrity are your personal banks. You build them up so when you falter, your colleagues and your boss know that this is not like you, and they do the check-in to see what's really going on. At the end of the day, the only person that you're really accountable to is the one that you look at every day in the mirror. Finally, the fourth value is excellence. Excellence is something we should strive for each and every day. Again, one of those basic tenets of life that you've heard likely a million times is that if a job is worth doing, it's worth doing well. Over the years, I've come to understand that there is a difference between excellence and perfection, and actually I have a mentor sitting in the room that helped me understand the difference. Excellence is always striving to do the best you can do. Perfection, on the other hand, in my mind, as I've come to understand, is unattainable. The biggest downfall of perfection is that it stifles innovation and trying to do new things in new ways. It builds fear of failure into the equation, so we stop trying. The critical part of excellence is actually learning from our mistakes. So when we talk about best practices, we should also talk about poor practices, because it's those poor practices that we try to, achieve excellence, we move through and make mistakes, and those poor practices become just as important as the best practices that we all strive to live by. From our vision flows our competency model, a body of work that we're very proud of. The thoughtful development of an individual's competencies has been an important part of development for public service employees. So what do we mean when we say the word competencies? Behavioral competencies provide a means of looking at what someone does and how they do it. It is a set of characteristics that makes the person exceptional. Unlike other methods of examining job requirements and performance which focus on technical or obtained results, behavioral competencies provide a systematic way to define and understand the behaviors used to attain outcomes and results. Think of the best teacher or coach you ever had in your life. Chances are the teacher or coach not only demonstrated sound technical knowledge and skills, but also a variety of behaviors that made your experience with that person exceptional. There are 3 core competency groupings in the Alberta Public Service Competency Model. The first grouping is thinking competencies. Thinking competencies relate to systems thinking and creative problem solving. Seeing what things are related and how they interrelate with one another, and then thinking outside the box and being curious to solve the problem. The second group of competencies is the achievement competencies, related to agility and drive for results. This involves the ability to deal with high degrees of ambiguity, using good judgment, and breaking large tasks or problems into their relevant component parts. The last is the relationship group of competencies. The relationship competencies are related to developing networks, bringing people together, and developing self and others, much like what IPAC, one of the basic tenets of IPAC is meant to do, bringing others together from various walks of life and sharing experiences. Related to systems thinking, dealing with ambiguity, needing to solve problems, and achieving results, is realizing that you only hold at any given time only part of the information, part of a problem, and knowing that engaging your network becomes critical. You must count on others and they on you to have the full picture. Work relationships are usually also one of the most fulfilling parts of our work. When you leave a job, it's often the people you miss the most. So don't miss them. Stay connected. The last part of the model is the 5 leadership practices of Kouzes and Posner, which are encourage the heart, model the way, challenge the process, inspire shared vision, and enable others to act. I've lived my entire career implementing these leadership practices. With that context set and the need articulated, let's take a moment to imagine where our leaders of 2033 are right now. Chances are they're actually in kindergarten class. Tomorrow's public service leaders are the students of today. What visionary leadership do we need to put into action to ensure that these kindergarten students are set up to be the successful leaders of our future workplace? How do we align curriculum in primary, secondary, and post-secondary schools to best equip the leaders of tomorrow's public service? Learning these skills is important at all levels, as competencies are bigger than the duties or skills that are required. How do we partner and share the responsibility for building leadership capacity and development? The report, Flat, Flexible, and Forward-Thinking Public Service Next by Canada's Public Policy Forum examines key drivers of change and their implications for public sector leadership, including competencies of leadership that will allow the public service to adapt to remain relevant and effective, as well as attractive, build and retain leadership in a rapidly changing external environment. The report states that while leadership competencies can differ across roles and levels, core qualities such as courage, humility, and resilience permeate at all levels. The report also states that 10 new competencies must be considered for our changing environment to help ensure that future public sector leaders are prepared for tomorrow. Let me highlight these competencies. The first one is the astute strategist who understands complexity, possesses broad knowledge, and is a quick thinker and possesses good judgment. The second is an empathetic facilitator who can build relationships, communicate effectively, find common ground, and manage expectations. The third is a pragmatic technophile who embraces innovation, continues learning about new technology, seeks opportunity to leverage technologies, and understand risks. The fourth is a catalyzing agent who is someone who adapts to change, drives to outcomes, seizes opportunities, and motivates others to act. The fifth is a prudent manager who can manage budgets, is business savvy, takes a balanced approach, and is resourceful. The sixth is a persuasive entrepreneur who has a curious mind, thinks creatively, believes that change is possible, and knows how to sell an idea. The seventh is the shrewd diplomat who possesses political acuity, is thick-skinned, manages multiple priorities, and is a good negotiator. This often shows up by not taking things personally and using feedback to learn and develop self, has good insight into self, and understands one's blind spots. This leader also pays attention to politics, both big and small. The fearless advisor is the eighth. The advisor filters relevant information, provides honest advice, has integrity, and understands when to push back and when to step back. This is often demonstrated by being respectful, honest, and trusted. A passionate talent scout is enthusiastic about work, plays an active role in talent management, values leadership at all levels, and embraces and leverages diversity. This is the person who will be handing out business cards at this session and speaking highly about their work and the people in the organization, trying to recruit you into the public service. And finally, the inspirational team captain that leads by example, demonstrates authenticity, has a positive attitude, and is a team player. This often shows up in the workplace by caring about others, being yourself, leading by your values, and being happy at work. Which of these competencies do you possess, even though these are future forward-looking, and which do you need to develop? How do we collectively ensure that we facilitate leaders of tomorrow to develop these competencies? As a senior leader, I must take responsibility for workplace culture by creating and championing a new vision that is followed through in action. Diverse talent pools representing our citizens we serve can help ensure policies and programs and services respond to changing needs. By adopting future performance measures tied to these competencies, will enable the public service to systematically identify and address skill gaps and purposefully develop our future leaders. As I conclude, I'll take a few minutes to share some of the current initiatives within the Alberta Public Service to build competency. The first that we've just undertaken is the Executive Development and Succession Program. This year, we are making an intentional effort to identify talent early and invest in ongoing talent. It's not that we haven't done this before, but we are starting with the executive managers to do true assessment to identify competency gaps and investing in development for executive leaders to actually develop their competencies. Supportive learning environment. We do this through continuing education, formal mentoring, knowledge sharing networks, peer support platforms that help ensure employees feel empowered and have access to rewarding careers. One of the last ones that I'll highlight is our Employee Engagement Initiative. This is a huge priority for the Alberta Public Service right now. A highly engaged workforce is imperative to us to create and sustain a high-performing organization that allows us to do our best work in providing the highest level of service for those we serve, which are Albertans. As we wrap up, let's go back to the future and the future public service leaders of 2033. who are likely right now in the middle of their first recess. The task of developing our future leaders is a bold one. By governments and educational institutions working together, we can develop and grow our students today to become strong leaders of the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Marvin Washington, please.
So, good morning. So, I want to sort of have 3 moments in my time to talk. The first one is sort of, where does the research come from, or why am I saying what it is I'm saying, and then what did I learn, and then advice that I would give. And so, sort of in a need to sort of update what I've been doing the last 6-7 years. And so, for the last 6 years, I've been in the faculty of School of Business. So I came here to University of Alberta. I was in this joint position, Phys Ed and School of Business. The last 6 years, it flipped, School of Business, Phys Ed. And I teach MBA students, their strategy class. And then the last 4 years, I've been teaching executives. The last couple of years, I run a senior leadership program with Alberta Health Services, RCMP. I do work in the government of Botswana. So there's that song, I've Been Everywhere Man. I feel like for the last 6 years, I've been everywhere man, right? And what I hear a lot about is what we're talking about today, sort of challenges of leadership, and not just leadership for today, but challenges of leadership for tomorrow, because it's a moving construct. And what I want to talk about for my time is, we spend a lot of effort on how to lead, competencies, skills. I want to spend some time to remind us that we need to think about what to lead. Because it isn't just developing the skills and competencies, it's developing sort of that intrinsic desire that you actually want to go somewhere, and then when you turn around, people are behind you. And so that's what I want to spend some time thinking about. And to do that, this was actually one of my classes, this would be call and response, but we'll just shorten that and I'll give you the answers that you would have said. So the first step is, think in your mind of a great leader. So someone who you would say exemplifies great leadership. And often I see, and I have my list here, we see Martin Luther King, we get Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, Apostle Paul, but there are also some influential leaders that were negative for the world, right? So you would never raise your hand and say Adolf Hitler as someone I would aspire to be, but as far as influential, he shifted the world. And there's others in that list. Now, think of the skills that they have that would make them a great leader. And here's where the gap widens. Because you would have a diverse set of skills, and some of you would mention a laundry list of 20 different things, but the people we just mentioned wouldn't have those lists. Some would be deficient in some characteristics. Some would have a strong suit in other characteristics. We want to say charisma. I'm not sure if Mother Teresa would have been charismatic. We want to say great oratory skills, Martin Luther King. Some of these people were not great orators. And so it's not really consistent what they are. But I do think they had 3 things in common. And this is what was the what of leadership is. The first one is consciousness. And so as I talk to organizations, I think in some sense, the list I mentioned, and I sort of put Mother Teresa sideways in there, they all spend time in prison. And we don't think about that. But there's something about being in prison that I would say shaped their leadership. And so you think the rest of the afternoon we're going to have other things like this. There's a bus outside. The bus is going to take you guys all off to prison. So then the question is, what is it about prison that helps us answer the what of leadership? I think prison gives us time to think. And I think we spend a lot of time on you tell me what to do or you tell me how to do, that sometimes we forget, what is it I actually want to do? And I think sometimes what we need to do is think that through. What I would say, develop consciousness. There's a great quote by Albert Einstein. No problem can be solved from the same consciousness that created it. No problem can be solved from the same consciousness that created it. In a sense, we get the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And so, a good example of this consciousness story with Mother Teresa. We see her as she died in 1997, and we want to say, wow, she was a saint. She was special. There'll never be another one like her. And we give her, I think that would be an insult to her. Why do I say that? Because when was she special? She was born in 1910. Her name was Agnes. She was born in Albania. Somewhere between 1910 and 1928, she gets her first calling. She wants to be a nun. That sounds like many of us. Somewhere between born and high school, we get our first calling. I want to go to school. I want to start a job. I want to do. But now let's trace her journey from 1928. She leaves Albania. She goes to Ireland, join her nun order. She leaves there and ends up in India. She wanted to be called Teresa with an H. That name was taken. So they said, guess what? We'll call you Teresa, no H. So now let's find Sister Teresa in India, 1931, with the wrong name. But we have been the future, right? We come from 1970, 1980. We go, guess what? You're going to win a Nobel Prize. You're going to be this wonderful person. What do you think she would have said? I'm no Mother Teresa. I'm just a nun, just trying to do my work in India. And then she gets her second calling, because we know this story. In our world, she's a school teacher at Holy Trinity. She's just teaching expats in Calcutta. But she looks outside the walls and she sees not so positive stuff. In her world, it was the lower caste. They were dying and no one was connected to them. And that bugged her. And she started thinking, I want to be outside the walls. Superintendent, you can't go outside the walls. The head of the actual church, you can't go outside the walls. Guess what she did? She went outside the walls. Now let's catch her in 1950. She's 40 years old at this point. And we say it's only 20 years away from you getting all the kings and queens and presidents and prime ministers of the world to come see you. What would her response be in 1950? I'm no Mother Teresa, and do you have $1? Because I have this new organization I want to start, I need help. 19 years, the world doesn't know her. She's just doing her work. She's just doing the thing that she thought she was there to do. And then the BBC comes calling. And then we see documentaries about her. And then she wins the Nobel Prize in '79. And then we go, wow, she was so special. She was so amazing. I don't think she was. I think she just got clear and conscious of what she wanted to lead. And in the face of a lot of opposition, she led it. The second thing to think about is passion. It isn't just good enough to be conscious, then get excited about this thing. This is Martin Luther King's last speech. So we call him prophetic because these were his last recorded words, and then he died the next day, if you know the story. But the context of the speech, it's a march in Memphis, Tennessee for garbage workers. It's going to rain the next day. He knows what happens. He gives marches, cities don't like it, they beat him up, they throw him in prison. He's trying to rally the troops for that job. Who's with me tomorrow to take on this thing that's going to lead us in jail and in prison? That's the context. And at the end of the speech he says, I've heard their threats about. I actually wrote it down here. And some begin to say they're threats, or talk about threats throughout. I don't know what will happen now. Well, I've got some difficult days ahead. But it doesn't matter. I like to live a long life, like anyone. Longevity has its place. And then he ends up by saying, and I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. How does he go from there are threats about, there are difficult days? In his specific case, there was a specific threat. He was late to the actual conference because there was a threat about a bomb on the plane. So they took extra precaution. And then when he gets there, if you know Martin Luther King's story, there were threats daily. So was he just delusional? Was he crazy to say, I'm happy today? What was he happy about? I think he was happy because he was getting to do the thing he wanted to do. I don't think he wished for race relations to be bad in the U.S., but if he had a purpose in his life, which was, I think God has called me to help address this situation, and he had a clear vision, promised land of what desired benefits were, then he gets to lean in and do the job in front of him. I bet he woke up every day saying, I'm happy today. Why? I get to do the thing I want to do. How cool is that? I went to school all these years to make an investment, to make a contribution, to make a difference. And guess what? I get to make that difference. And so I think if he lived the next day, he'd have said the same thing. Threats about, I'm happy. Because he said that every day. Now the hardest part of this is there are threats about. There are difficult days. And this is why I think the third thing to think about is resiliency. And so if you read like business books or self-help books or great thinkers, and you probably could shout this out, the current one now, Brene Brown. Because her work basically starts with vulnerability and it ends up with resiliency. Because what she's pretty much is saying is what? Life is tough. You're going to get knocked down. Just because you do doesn't mean you can give up. And she uses the quote from the poem, it was a speech that Roosevelt gave. Basically it says, ignore the critic, because the critic's not in the ring. Ignore everything around you, because they're going to talk all this negative stuff about you. Because even if you lose, you're already winning. Why? You're in the ring. You're trying to make a difference. And she would say, you're daring greatly. Or said a different way, Eminem. What does he basically say? This is my opportunity, feet don't fail me not. This may be the only opportunity that I got. And so I think as we begin to think about the skills of leadership, I wanted to have us spend some time thinking about how do we get people to think about what they want to lead? Where is their passion? How are they going to get conscious about what they want to lead? And then how do we now reinforce issues of resiliency and issues of bounce back? Because I would imagine if there are threats today, the threats are only going to get worse in 1930 and 1940. So then I think for us to really encourage or shape or direct future leaders, we should sort of remind them of those things that are needed as well. And thanks a lot.
Thank you. Next would be Dr. Heather Zwicker, please.
So when I was in graduate school, I was training for the ivory tower. If you had asked me in those days what my life as a professor would have been like, I would have said, long periods of quiet contemplation, interrupted by conversations with, scintillating conversations, let's say, with only the most talented students. That was my ivory tower fantasy. In this fantasy, there are no emails to answer, there are no papers to grade, there are no risk management reports, there are no article revisions, there are certainly no deadlines, there's no email, there are no annual reports to file, no comprehensive institutional plans to compose, and, not sure if I mentioned this already, no email. It hasn't been exactly like that. My point is that the university is not an ivory tower. If it ever was, it certainly is not anymore. We take very seriously all three parts of our role as a public research university and take to heart our role as educating individuals for the responsibilities of citizenship and training future leaders. They start in kindergarten, as Christina's just said, but I'd like to think that they end in graduate school. Building intentional connections between graduate study and public life has been a priority for us at the University of Alberta, and our work in this area travels under the moniker professional development. We're very fortunate to have a grant from the Government of Alberta to pilot some approaches to building intentional connections between the university and public life. And I find the title of this grant very interesting to think about. It's called A Vision for Innovation in Alberta. If you're like me, the word innovation causes that little inner reptilian eyelid to come down a little bit because it is such a buzzword and it is a little bit overused. So let me reframe what I think innovation is getting at in the form of a question. I think the question that we've been challenged to answer is, what new approaches to learning, particularly in higher education, will Canadians need in order to thrive in an evolving society and an evolving labor market? So I'm going to pitch 5 approaches to learning that I think constitute innovative in today's society. And I'll try my best to trace these to the competencies matrix that you will have seen or you already have at your table on a handout. They're available out at the front if you haven't grabbed one yet. So the 5 are entrepreneurial mindsets, mentorship and sponsorship, a shift in emphasis from teaching to learning, problem-based interdisciplinary study, and broad-based culture change in society as a whole. So the first one, entrepreneurial mindsets. The traditional concept behind entrepreneurship is that students take an idea or a process or an algorithm or a product and they turn it into a business or they turn it into a livelihood. And that's certainly part of what we have to do now in graduate school, we know this. But within our team at the Faculty of Grad Studies and Research, we've been talking a lot more about the bigger concept of entrepreneurial mindsets, because we think that what students need to learn to do is to advocate successfully for their ideas in a variety of contexts. So it's not just the old-fashioned idea of research commercialization, it's rather the idea that students can have an idea, they can figure out, as Marvin just said, the what of leadership, and make those ideas material in a setting that, of course, none of us gets to choose. We go to work, we work with the people we work with, we have the jobs we do, we have the responsibilities that we've signed up for. None of that is how we imagined it in our heads, perhaps, but it is an important context, and sometimes those contexts can feel very much like constraints. So an entrepreneurial mindset would involve competencies like being visionary, having a kind of systems thinking to diagnose that context and speak effectively to it, and an ability to mobilize and develop people. So entrepreneurial mindset. Second, mentorship, and I'm going to add mentorship and sponsorship. The concept here, match those who've been there with those who want to get there at scale. That's the project for us. Of course, the immediate gain of mentorship is those one-to-one relationships. But the big payoff, to my mind, is that mentorship establishes strong personal bonds between the university and the world beyond our campuses. So the core competencies here are that it can mobilize and develop people, develops a collaborative work environment, and I can't resist, in a room full of accomplished women, I cannot resist adding, we are good at mentorship, and we benefit from mentorship. So I just want to emphasize that as an important point. So that's my second one, mentorship, sponsorship. The third, a shift in focus from teaching to learning. What I have in mind here is that we know that we have to start designing programs of study that suit our learners and not just our disciplines. The university, like the government, I think, tell me if I'm right about this, is organized around departments with very specific, right? We're experiencing this as a kind of siloed existence. And what we're trying to do at the Faculty of Grad Studies, and this is in collaboration with our partners across Alberta and indeed across Canada, is we're trying to move toward something that will respond to what we know about Albertans, which is that they are curious, they are lifelong learners, and just as you hear about people moving through a number of different roles or careers over the course of their working lives, I would like to see graduate school as something that exists for people, a place to return to in those gaps, an opportunity to retool, or even better, an opportunity to stand back, and again I'm going to gloss Marvin here and say an opportunity to stand back and think. So, pragmatically speaking, this means more post-baccalaureate certificates, possibly ones that ladder into a master's degree, so it's not come here and stay until I say you're done, but rather I have 1 semester leave and I can do 3 courses and that will result in a post-baccalaureate certificate. Blended delivery courses, that kind of thing. So again, we're looking at the core competencies of mobilizing and developing people, but also with a bigger attention, I think, here to strategy and creativity. Number 4, problem-driven interdisciplinary study. This follows on what I was just saying about having programs that suit more than just our disciplines. I often put it provocatively to my colleagues, which is to say, if we are not training future professors, then why protect disciplines at all? The future of graduate education, I believe, is going to be problem-driven, multidisciplinary, and collaborative. This poses huge problems institutionally, but it offers such intellectual richness and wealth that I believe we can press through and solve those problems. And as a side note to this one, I will say that we need to move away from our reliance on the thesis and develop less solitary, more publicly accessible expressions of scholarly mastery. And there are many pilots going on around the country right now that explore some of these, whether they're practice-led PhDs or expressing your research as an electronic archive, or doing a series of public broadcasts, or capstone projects for industry. There are a lot of ways to express what you've done that don't amount to go to your room and don't come out until you've written a book. Finally, what we need is broad-based culture change in society as a whole. So that's kind of doable. I would think you'll be on that by this afternoon, is my understanding. Right. So a few OECD stats for you to think about. 51% of Canadians have a university degree or diploma, compared to the OECD average of 32%. So we are very well educated in Canada. But this education does not always express itself in terms of mastery of skills. So the 2013 Adult Skills Survey undertaken by the OECD showed that Canada was just at the average for literacy, below the OECD average in numeracy, and above the OECD average in being able to use technology to solve problems. I don't think we should assume that that means Canadians just look to Wikipedia for the answer to everything, but I do think that given our high level of educational attainment, we should be doing a little bit better than that. I think that this is it's a situation, it's a problem solved by culture change to the extent that we need a populace that is educated, we need an educated populace, and we need a populace that respects education. So my soapbox sounds something like this. If we're going to provide graduate degrees for a large number of people, we have to develop a respect, or again, to cite Marvin, even a passion for what graduate education can do, not just for the individual, but for the world. So just to summarize briefly, my public research university is collaborative, it's knowledgeable, it's broad, it's problem solving, it's outward facing, and it's bold. Skills, competencies, education are important to the economic, social, political, and cultural well-being of Canada and Canadians. We know that higher education improves economic competitiveness and community engagement. We can and we must work together to provide the kind of public leadership our cities, province, nation, and world require. Thanks.
Heather, so last but definitely not least, Dr. Lorne Parker, please.
Well, thank you. Going last is a blessing and a curse, I can tell you that, because I had some, if you look at my notes, I actually was going to say some things and then heard all these things from my colleagues here today, and I've started to shift a little bit about where I'm coming from. And I guess maybe I'll start from I understand the corporate world. I'm an executive director in the corporate side of the business. And I don't say that boastfully, but we have a $1.5 billion annual budget that we're responsible for and have a number of corporate leaders. And so I could talk from that premise because that's my daily life, but I'm actually going to talk maybe a little bit at a little different level in terms of how we see leadership being developed in public education. There's no question. So I'm going to start from the basis that I was a teacher before I was in the corporate side. And I have my area of research in my doctoral studies in corporate communication structures, so I understand that role, but I want to take it to a little different side of why we develop leaders in public education. There's no question that we have a moral imperative to develop the future leaders for tomorrow. For public service, for corporations, there's no question that we have a responsibility to develop that skill set. And a lot of things that we do, I would say we do a fairly decent job of it, but I think there are lots of gaps. But I think we have a higher calling in terms of why we develop leadership and why we need to focus on that in the public education. The why, whether you go back to Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, Dewey, Rousseau, Leithwood, Fullen, all kinds of people had opinion of how and why you would develop leaders. But I think it comes down to, for us, is that we want to help students find their voice. And I think that's the key piece of leadership in developing leadership skills in schools, that we want our students to be able to find their voice at the level they're at. And we don't do a very good job of that for all our students. We have students that emerge as leaders. You know who they are. They're presidents of the student council. They're involved in lots of leadership opportunities, but the vast majority of our students don't get a chance to really exercise that voice because we don't have a process that brings everybody in. But I think we need to do a better job of that. We also have opportunities for our students to participate in decision making, and we're doing a better job of that now than we have in the past. When I was in school, if you weren't on the leadership team, the student council, you had very, very limited opportunities to have any voice in how your school was run. We're making changes there. We have student trustees, we have broader representation of decision making at the school level. So we're trying to broaden that role. We also, another reason why we develop leadership in the school level is to have students understand their rights and responsibilities. And again, there's more opportunities now for students to do that, but there's still gaps in that. And so look at some of the gaps that are reasons why we're not doing as good a job as we can. And I guess it is being a little bit critical, but I think it's also being real reflective or introspective in terms of why things aren't going as well as they should, and maybe this will be some point of conversations when we do some of the question and answers. We have some cultural, leadership embeddedness in the curriculum. You'll see that in social studies and a few other places where students have a chance to have their leadership roles, but there isn't enough. And so it's left up to the individual teacher or the individual school or system to pull that out, and some do a better job than others. And not only is it, there's a difference across classrooms, but also across systems. Some systems are way better at developing leadership and skills in students. I would say Evident Public does a fairly good job, and I have to say that, I think I'm on camera, but we do a fairly good job because we look for creative ways to bring out that student voice through leadership opportunities. And we do that through we have liaison committees where we have students involved in providing input into district operations, into school operations. Obviously we have student councils, we have leadership on sports teams, we have debating and public speaking, we have mentorship programs in schools, we have lots of opportunities through the visual arts, the performing arts, and also through the curriculum. But still, the vast majority of our students aren't getting an opportunity to have leadership roles. Just the ones that actually self-identify really have a chance to get really a more of a intense training in development of leadership. So there's something that we can do collectively, and I think this is where you folks come in as well, is I think that we can do a better job of working together to develop those skills, and that you don't just wait for an invitation to come and work with us, that you actually seek out opportunities to be involved in the school system, develop the skills. If they're important, then we need to do it as a collaborative. I also think that the province needs to look at maybe the Australian model, where they actually have a curriculum that is, I think it's nationwide now, that is designed to develop the leadership skills of students. That it's focused, it's resourced, and it involves not only the school systems but also the broader community. And I think that would be if I give any advice to the province, that we would develop something more specifically related to the development of leadership skills in students. And the other premise that I was going to speak just briefly about, when it was mentioned in a couple of the other ones, is that the leadership opportunities are an important strategy for promoting equity and addressing invisible barriers that work against the participation of students in some groups. And that's something that we can work together on. Like, this is a good representation in here. Actually, it's more one gender balanced than the other. But I think that if you look at leadership roles in our schools, and I was mindful of that. Again, this is where I'm going to get in trouble. But I was mindful of that when I was in a superintendent's meeting just the other day. I was zoned. And so I was just sitting there and I was thinking about the leadership and the future leadership for the zone, and we had probably 40-some superintendents in the room, and I just looked around for gender balance. I thought, we don't have gender balance here. So if you're going to, well, you know which way the gender is going if I'm saying that, right? But we don't have gender balance in the most senior levels of leadership in the province. There wasn't a gender balance there, and I just was mindful that it's not just about, and there was one, I think all of them are Caucasian. So when I was looking at it, I was thinking, you know, it's not just about developing leadership skills. It's about making sure that you have fair representation in the population when you develop those skills. And you can't leave it to chance. That you actually, if you're going to develop those skill sets, whether it's us in the public school system or whether it's you folks in your public sector leadership, it can't be just something that we say is important. We have to be really strategic in how we do that. And that for me, when I started to think about how do you weave that development of leadership skills from primary through to senior levels, that we got to do something differently. And so that would be my admonition, my push to you, that don't just be satisfied that you come together and you talk about the competencies. You actually have to figure out what you need to do, starting in primary all the way through to where you sit today. So I'll just leave it at that. That's a bit of a ramble, but that's going last caused me to start to get off script. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all of the thought leaders today for your important notes. It's just about 10 o'clock in the morning here, so we'll have time for a couple of questions. If there's anybody who's interested in asking a question, please, you can stand and go to the microphone here in the middle of the room. Any questions, anyone? Okay. Thank you so much. I guess you were so thorough that there's no need for questions.
So it's my privilege this morning to thank the thought leaders that are here with us today for sharing their rich perspectives on today's theme. You are recognized as leaders both inside and outside of your organizations, so thank you very much for taking time to be with us today. You bring a wealth of experience and knowledge, and I personally want to thank you because I gained some cool insights from the comments that you provided. But an excellent primer for our day. On behalf of the audience today, I want to take this opportunity to thank you very much for being with us. We have some gifts that we want to present to you, a small token of our appreciation. Thank you so much for your contribution to this very important work. So we're running a few minutes ahead of schedule. I'm hoping that our guests will be able to stay with us through our coffee break that we're going to have right now. And I really encourage you to take an opportunity today, looking at the variety of people in the room, to connect with some people that you don't already know. Introduce yourself and have a chat, and really get to know each other. Do some networking, do some relationship building, and have a chance also to talk to our guests as well. So we're going to reconvene here at 10:30. Thank you.